only 15% of all franchises ever get more than 50 locations open. So actually open. Only 2% ever get more than 100 locations open.
You better get out there. You better get me 10 leads. I don't care what you need to do. I need you to go to your grandma's house. If you're going to that hair salon, you get those email addresses or you're fired.
No way. I noticed Dick. I noticed.
Hello, Gym World Worldwide. So excited to be back to you. As always, it's John Franklin, Mateo Lopez, and your sometimes guest host, Mark Fisher. And we are excited today because today our guest is someone I demanded we bring on the show, my friend, Rick Mayo. So for those of you that are living under a rock and have not yet had the opportunity to learn from and get to know Rick, Rick is a very savvy operator. He's been in the business over 30 years, one of the original people to run a personal training studio, the guy who's done absolutely everything. He's sat on boards for lots of fancy big corporations that you've heard of. And most recently, he's taken his incredibly successful license Alloy personal training and now has turned it into a franchise model. And I just want to disclose my bias here just out front. I am a franchisee. So I am such a fan of Rick and his big old brains that don't enjoy of your own. I am such a fan of Rick that I signed up. So, for those of you that are familiar with my work, I've done some cool things, but I saw what Rick was doing and game recognizes game. I was like, okay, this is smart. I want in on this. So in addition to having the opportunity to now get to learn from Rick as a franchisee, he's just always somebody in the space that I know brings a lot of value and has a lot of great things I've learned from over the years. And I'm super excited to share him with our dedicated audience, particularly, John, what is it? Rapa Nui, I think, is where we're number one, right? Rapa Nui?
Rapa Nui, best fitness business podcast in all of Rapa Nui. Read that again.
I shouldn't have said that. Rick's going to get nervous now and intimidated. But so Rick, forget we said that.
Before we let Rick fire, but before we let Rick fire, I have a question for you, Mark Fisher, right? Because you're something of a guru yourself. You have a fitness business podcast. You host many others and co-host them, and people seek your advice on running a gym. And so for you to then go buy into a franchise is a large testament to Rick. But, what was it, right? I'm assuming you could run a small group training concept because you do. What was it about Alloy and Rick's concept that you're like, yeah, I want to do this. This makes sense. And it sounds easier than doing all this myself.
And keep in mind, listeners, Mark has been bought by Big Alloy. Okay, he's been bought by Big Alloy.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind when you listen to this answer.
Yeah. So disclosure, I get paid by the word. So if I were to thin slice it and tell you the main thing, it is that the thing that I have learned over the years is so crucial for any kind of scale that, to my mind, Rick is the absolute master at. It's keeping it dead simple. So I actually paid for the constraint. Now, I want to acknowledge this is not, I think, the right fit for everybody that has any entrepreneur instincts. I think there's a certain kind of person that has a lot of rebellion and they just like anything that feels like being asked to paint in a box, they're going to freak out about. I'm the opposite. I had a very emotional, insecure household. It feels like a hug to me when you give me constraints. So it's really protecting me from myself. So the amount of brain drain I save to not have to think of everything on my own and be like, well, what if we add this other? Oh, I'm not sure about that. Or how much a raise should we give that? Or, maybe we have a general manager and dedicated salespeople. Or no. Okay, no, let's have the trainers do salespeople. We'll have a dedicated man. Or, maybe we should do classes or maybe what if we have 8 people in a thing? So largely, for me, a lot of the value was not having to think about those things. And to your point, I like to think I'm bringing some operational chops, and I really look forward, I hope, to really, giving whatever I can to benefit the entire system. But having a proven model and someone like Rick that I trust, who I know is going to be, as we launch this franchise, going to continue to learn things and keep things simple and protect a guy like me from myself. Well, wow, that's absolutely worth it. Now, the one other thing I think is worth knowing, part of this too, I really got to give a shout out to is I have an operating partner Greg, who's been a longtime friend, he's actually a client, a member of the Unicorn Society, and somebody that I knew I trusted to go in on this project. So that also is part of what made this doable, is it allows me to leverage not only a done-for-you system, but someone that I trust and I have a lot of respect for and I really admire to help, frankly, do some more of the on-the-ground stuff because I'm not close enough to the facility. I suspect I'm not going to be there a whole lot. So for me, this just really made sense for the next thing I was looking for in my career, to take a lot of both skills and, frankly, resources and assets I've developed from my other opportunities and get into a vehicle that I think will allow me an opportunity for scale that my current business, as much as I love, I don't think is going to have.
So, Rick, what's Alloy?
It's been like
Great question. I don't know. I really don't. Wait, am I up? Are you talking to me? Like, I'm just like enthralled with Mark. Like, it's amazing. Look, man, I'm so honored. Let's just start with that. Like, I can't tell you, like, to have a guy like Mark in the system, there's not a greater compliment. Like, when people ask, we're one of the few franchises that will allow existing fitness business owners to buy into the franchise. And I did that because I've known a lot of people in the industry for a long time. So I'd be crazy not to be able to identify people that I also trust, that are really good operators, that, I would allow to buy into the system, because I know that they're going to help us as much as we're going to give them this vehicle for success. They're also going to help us, just like Mark mentioned. So when you have somebody that has a coaching group and is seen as a guru in the space by me as well, and they put their trust in you and they invest their hard-earned dollars in a concept that you've built. I mean, of all the things that have happened in the franchise, like, to get Mark on board is probably one of the things that I'm most proud of. And I really do mean that. So, I'm honored, and thanks for having me on. And Mark, it's great to see your smiling face as always. But look, guys, at the end of the day, it is a simple concept based on personal training done in a small group setting. And it's something that we've been doing since 1992. And we've really perfected it over time. And we've done a lot of things. I mean, I've sat on the board for giant franchises. We've built boot camps. We've taught one-on-one training. We've taught people how to do virtual training, all the verticals of coaching that you can possibly imagine. We've built business models, performance, comp models, pricing structures, sales systems. And at the end of the day, the real gap in the market in our specialty was always personal training in a small group setting. And to Mark's point, we've tried 8, 7, 4, 3. I mean, you name it, right? And we fell on this sort of 1-to-6 ratio as a number of people that we could offer a good value for personal training, but still keep that brand promise. And then you just build all the systems around that, right? And certainly the way that we service it and the technology and all those things have evolved over the years. We'll continue to do so. But that's it. It's a dead simple model. 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, 130 to 150 members is a very healthy model. And you have one coach in the room at any given time training 6 people. And the technology allows us to make it truly personal training. And actually, Mark's partner, Greg, is an awesome guy. He was just here. So we just have training week. Second week of every month is training week for franchisees. And finally got real estate and everything locked away with these guys. And Greg and his team were here. And by the way, Mark, your team did really well. So congrats to you guys. You hired a good team.
Can you give us the breakdown of a location? So is it like an owner, then you have an operator, and then a certain amount of coaches, or is it how's the division of labor split up?
Yeah, so it's really simple. You have 3 employees. That's it. And so it can be a combination of things, but typically you're going to have a director, which I guess for terms of this call, imagine the manager. That's a person who's, they're strictly responsible for driving the business, take care of the flock, sell the new folks, right? And all the other metrics around the business. And then you're going to have typically a head coach, if you will, or a trainer that runs the bulk of the hours, and then another part-timer, and that's it. So it's a really simple model from a labor perspective as well. It's very efficient, right? And you run shifts of training. So imagine like 6 to noon and then like 4 to 8 in the afternoon. I mean, it's nuanced, but outside in, it's dead simple. And so 3 employees is, you only have to find 3. And 2 that are really good, and the other one's part-time, and they're probably going to come and go, but we know that. So we have quick onboarding and smooth exit, built into the system so you can quickly get people up to speed. But yeah, it's dead simple, even from a labor model.
And you said shifts, but it's class-based, right? So it'll be like every hour on the hour. There's
no. It's sessions. Nope. It's
right.
sessions.
If you say the C word, you have bought yourself some burpees, my friend. Now, you don't have to do
You
them
should see
now.
what my
You can.
spine looks like.
I would prefer that, but like you can do them later if you'd like. I'll take you on the honor system. But yeah, listen, we joke about that. We just say like the C word, right? Like don't use the C word because if you think about the word class, like you guys, you've been involved with like CrossFit from what I heard, and there's like a bunch of class-based concepts. That's what most fitness franchising is. But if you think about it, there are pricing and service anchors that go with that word. Like I can take a free class at the YMCA or the community center, right? I'm going to take a pottery class or what. So like class has a certain, connotation that comes with it. And session is more, we're trying to use all the vernacular and, or the nomenclature and everything that comes from personal training. Like, let's stick with that, right? And little nuanced things like that, session as opposed to class, it makes a big difference when you look at the sum of all the little opportunities to speak to personal training as opposed to class-based. So I know, Mark laughed about that because we do go pretty hard in the paint on that class word. So, so it's a session, but yes, a shift is say 6 sessions in a row, right? An hour each.
I fucking love that. I fucking love it. I actually released a newsletter today where through Two Brain Business, which is a coaching company I'm involved in, we release a state of the industry every year. And to do that, we aggregate information from a lot of the gym management software providers. So last year we did just under 11,000 gyms. And so what we found that is pretty interesting and has large implications, like it skews heavily towards CrossFit because that's just the world we come from. But when we looked at all that information, the average large group class, you want to guess how many people attend across 11,000 gyms?
8.
6.6. And so that is the average attendance across 11,000 gyms. And they're charging the average that a person pays in one of those classes is $160 a month. So having talked to Mark and people in Mark's group who seem to be very heavily influenced by some of the work that you've done, like the thing I'm trying to tell the world of CrossFit is that you guys are already doing small group training. You're just charging large group prices. And so having like a very clear difference there and calling it a session instead of class is great from just like just from a branding and anchoring standpoint. So I like this. I like this a lot. So we talked to people who run small group personal training models that do it 2 different ways. One is everybody's doing their own program. The other is everyone comes in and does the same variation of the same workout every day. Which is Alloy?
Both, historically speaking. And indulge me for a minute and I'll tell you how we got to the system that we currently use. Because, again, the great thing about 30 years is like you can ask me anything and if we're not doing it or we are doing it, there's a valid reason. And there's usually like lots of years of data to say like, okay, we tried that. Here's why it didn't work. And I think that's the advantage, right, of being around forever. So when we first switched, it was around year 2000, right about when you guys were born, I think. We moved from small group or like one-on-one personal training. Now, mind you, at the time, you guys were doing 3,000 sessions a month. So it was not a bad business model, right? And we moved all of those people to what we are calling now, personal training in a small group. And the reason why was because, like, let's say Mark's coming in and he's like, hey, Rick, can I bring a friend of mine in? He wants to work out. I'd like to work out with him. And I'm like, sure. And so they come in, they're paying a little less. I'm making more for the hour. I'm helping more people. I can pay my coaches a little better. And you're like, And then they're like, hey, we have a third guy that we hang out with. It goes to Burning Man with us. Can we bring him in? I'm like, sure. Now there's 3 people there. I'm paying a little bit less. I'm still making more per hour. It's like, and so they're having more fun. There's more of a professional boundary for coach. And so I'm like, wow, this is like a win-win-win all the way around. So we ripped the Band-Aid off and said, we're going fully to this model, right? It took about a year to get all of our customers to like buy into this thing. So, everyone hates change. So they ended up loving it, but they didn't like it at first. So it took about a year to get all of our clients over to this model. Well, obviously in one-on-one training, you think you're running personalized programming for everyone. And we were to a certain extent. So when we moved to personal training in a small group, we were absolutely convinced, like you have to do custom programming for everyone in the group, right? But what you find over time is that you start building philosophies. And Mark and I are on the same speaking circuit and some of the top strength coaches in the world. And we're all influenced by sort of the same science and the same people if you're sort of in that world. And it's really the best. I mean, it really is. It's like, that's the best places where you should be looking. So, okay, we're looking at this science and we're looking at how people move in a sitting-centric society. And you start to see all of these commonalities. And our customer avatar is similar because we're in the burbs. It's expensive. So it pushes us into this avatar that we have, which is like 40 to 70 or 45, 65, right? So we start seeing all these commonalities. So you're doing custom programming, but what you start to see is you're doing versions of the same programming anyway, right? If you take like a good framework, like a push, pull, hip, knee, do some core, maybe a mat finisher, go home, like in some way, shape, or form. If you talk to Mike Boyle, he's doing it with athletes. If you talk to Eric Cressy, he's doing it with his guys. They're just doing it a little differently. The dosage, the load, the speed, right? All those things are different, but actually we're all kind of using the same framework. So you're using the same framework with everyone, and then you soon find that at volume, you're sort of recreating the wheel for everyone that comes in. So I was like, well, I wonder if we really need to keep doing custom programming when in fact we're kind of doing the same thing at different scales for everyone. So our first iteration of trying to create a systematic approach was to say, okay, we're going to do the same programs for everyone. We're going to create, say, 3 different workouts throughout the week. But we're going to rotate those workouts through different coaches because we were worried about the perception of someone looking around the room and saying, I'm doing the same thing they're doing. This is not personal training, right? And because we'd always done custom programming, even though it was similar, it was custom. So we're like, all right, here's what we'll do. And it was so confusing. This was a terrible idea. We had like, okay, say I'm coach number 1. And we had 3 workouts for the week, like an A, B, C. On Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to run the A workout with my clients. Now, coach number 2 is going to run the B workout. Coach number 3 is going to run the C workout, whatever that was. And so that way, if someone looked across the room, the same coach might be running the A workout, right? But people would see different things. And all that's great, except that our clients, because we were systematic, they can work with any coach they want. So by Friday, all bets were off, and you had a coach that would walk onto the floor and they would have like an A, 2 C's, a B, and you know what I mean? It's like they're running custom programs anyway because the schedule had gotten all jacked up. So not everybody worked with the same coach at the same time. So then, but in that transition, no one noticed, by the way. It was fine. It got a little easier for coaches. So I was like, all right, well, maybe if we just run the same workout, but we just do versions of it, right? That would work. And everyone's like, oh, I don't know, man. Everybody's they're going to balk. They're going to look. And so, but we tried it. And sure enough, no one even noticed, right? Because you guys get this if you've coached people. So in the real world, as it's going down, let's just take a push up, right? It's like, okay, Mark comes in, he's super buff. So we've got a 50-pound sandbag on his back. There's a 70-year-old lady that's never worked out doing push-ups against the wall. We see it as a push-up 12 degrees separated. The customer doesn't even think they're doing the same thing at all, right? And then you take into account our customer avatar, which they have a few chinks in their armor if they've lived long enough. So then you got a bad shoulder. Now you're not even doing a push-up, right? So there's all these like variations and things going on that make it so that in real world, there may be a couple of people doing something similar, right? Most people are doing a version of. Then it makes it really scalable because we can write a template. We have a communication tool, which is an app where 6 tiles pop up. It says, here's Mark, here's his level of fitness, here's his do's and don'ts, or basically goals and injuries. And then you just connect them to the right program and account for injuries. That's super scalable, right? And you're on the iPad and you just toggle back and forth. Like, here's the clients, boop, there's program, toggle back and forth, right? So it evolved into that eventually, but we didn't start that way. So for anyone listening, it's like, I don't know, man, my clients are really used to custom programming. They really don't care. It just depends on how comfortable you are with it and how you're going to present it. But we went through all of those iterations and landed on like, let's just write a template and then let's have a communication tool that tells any coach in the building how to connect the person to the right version of that program, because these programming principles are the ones that we're going to use with everyone anyway. Again, it's going to be dosage, exercise choice, load, whatever the variables are. There's a million, right?
So while we're on this topic of like, is it personal training? Is it not? Whatever. How are you actually selling this now? So if someone comes in, they see an ad, because I'm looking at the marketing. Some of it says like, come in for free personal training or whatever, talk to a personal trainer. But then when they sit down, maybe they're expecting one thing and then they're seeing something that's slightly different. So how are you kind of managing and switching the, I guess, framing when you're sitting down and selling someone?
Yeah, I mean, look, it has personal training on the door, and that also has pricing and service anchors that come with it. So I know, like, in the curse of knowledge that we have as fitness professionals, you assume that if it says personal training, people are going to come in with this preconceived notion that it's one-on-one training. Most of our customers honestly never mention it. I mean, hardly ever. I never hear it from franchisees. I've never personally experienced it where someone sat down and said, how exactly are you going to be personal training me? They really don't care. They're like, I have a goal. All you have to do, and we have a full-on scripted sales process, which is also a lot of gathering of data, and it's also telling the customer that we know what we're doing. And so when we're finished with that process, no one ever says, well, how are you going to personal train me? Is it going to be one-on-one? They really just don't ask. And so it really has, I know what you're thinking, and as a fitness professional, I get it. It just doesn't come up. So like after doing it for 20 years, like no one ever asks, how are you going to service me? It says personal training. We run a process that tells them it's personal training. How it manifests itself on the back end, they could care less, honestly. And without over explaining what it is on the front end, because we don't, when they get into the small groups, if you read any of our success stories, they're always like, I love the fact that I'm in a group, but they can still give me exactly what I need because the other people support me, but I still get to account for my injuries and my fitness level and what have you. So they really speak to exactly what we like about it. It's like you still get the personalization, still personal training, and we feel like we can meet that brand promise, but also you have a community, right? There's other people holding you accountable. It's a lot more fun. One-on-one gets a little boring at times if we're honest. So I don't know, Mateo, it's a great question, and we get it a lot from the fitness professional side, but just in real world, it never manifests itself that way.
Sounds great. I'm ready to sign up.
If I can pull out two things that I think are useful for listeners to consider when they consider their business. I mean, first of all, this concept around really anchoring to personal training as opposed to classes is so important. And there's some obvious reasons for that too, right? Because it's not only the anchoring, but just practically speaking, you're going to build your SEO, your ads, your Google, what you show up for under the map when people are searching for personal trainers near me. And from a price point, you're going to compare very favorably. And as Rick says, most people don't necessarily care that it's going to be one-on-one. And honestly, maybe if you do have an issue here and there, I think the lion's share of people don't care. Because I'll give one other experience share as regards to this other question around what is too templated, what is too individualized. And listen, there's room for reasonable people to disagree. And I think, John, you're right. We're still seeing, I think, a little bit of a bifurcation between two approaches to small group, which historically, by the way, in my corner of the industry is referred to as semi-private. I think we've largely moved away from that model because, again, a consumer is not going to Google semi-private. They're not really sure what that is. It's personal training in a small group. So there are likely people listening, and some gym owners, and some of them my friends, and some of them my clients, that are adamant that it has to be customized and needs to be individualized. And I would just plus one Rick's perspective on this, having done this for many years. Listen, I think we all know we're asking the question, how do we create the best business vehicle to deliver these services with the best possible training experience? And to my mind, listen, can you do maybe a 4-on-1, maybe even shoot for a 6-on-1 with an individualized program? In some cases, if you're an absolute freak, right? And they exist, right? We talked to my good buddy James Pratt on the show recently. If you're a freak, then maybe you can do that. But if you want something that's going to scale, that doesn't require a team of rocket scientists, genius that are super charismatic and really adept exercise physiologist people, I think this slightly more templated approach, which as we've established can still be pretty individualized, is the way to go. Now, again, if I were to steelman the more customized program, okay, listen, you can play with the numbers, right? Maybe, okay, you do 4-on-1, maybe you're going to increase your price points by another 20, 30% off of what you might charge in a 6-on-1. To my mind, I just don't see that as scalable, number one. And number two, trainers, don't get mad at me. I promise I'm a nerd, trainers. I'm a nerd with you. I just don't think it's that important at this point in my life and career, at least not for the general population. And I would say from our corner, I think for Rick and I come from, and Rick, I'd be curious for your hot take on this. My sense is to some extent, we have a little bit of a different challenge because sometimes we deal we get a little too rocket science-y sometimes for our own goods because you have all these tip of the spear individuals that are looking to optimize because a lot of what we're pulling from is the rarefied air of elite sports performance. And by all means, I have benefited tremendously from that educational pedigree. And I think when we're being honest about what a Gen Pop person needs, it often can be a lot simpler than we want it to be. And I would make the final point, not only is that better for your business, that simplicity also benefits your client by you not making it this inaccessible, not as fun rocket scientist thing, right? So I think you all know I'm in a program called Strategic Coach, and one of the things they hammer that is so true is part of creating value is creating simplicity from the complexity. Like part of what we do is make a complicated world and we make it simple. We say, hey, just do this. And I think at its best, that's what we're offering to with our fitness product. And frankly, that's kind of what Rick has done for me as a franchisor. It's like, just do this. It's actually not negative. That's actually positive. You rocket scientist, though I love you, even though you're going to give me hate mail. I still love you.
Yeah, it's true. Look, I'd rather put more juice into the experience around the programming because programming is programming, right? And I will tell you that we all know that really, the coach with a bunch of letters behind their name, if they're not a really dynamic person or fun to be around, they can still have a pretty empty schedule, right? Then you go down the street and there's some kid working at LA Fitness and he's really good looking and he's funny and you'd like to have a beer with him. His schedule's packed, right? He just does dumb machine workouts and we're all like, because we're all in this, again, scientific mindset. But it's like, look, that guy, if he's not hurting people, he's probably helping a lot more people than the person with all the letters who can't get anyone, can't get out of his own way or her way because they're just geeking out too much, right? So I think somewhere in between though, right? Like what I'm proud of is like, look, we're not like a Russian vodka bar, set up with like a headset and just music. And we're just like, go, go, go. And there's no training at all. Like, I don't like that. But also, like, you can't be too scientific. I think if you can create a great customer experience and have some integrity around your program, right in the middle of that, you guys, is where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we try to understand. It's like, okay, temper some of the trainer geek side that we love. But also, like, let's not discount the fact that if you can have a great experience, I mean, look at some of the franchises that have historically, at least over the last decade, been very successful. Very light on programming, just high on fun and customer experience, right? And you got to think about this through the lens of the consumer. I mean, they're just going to get up in the morning, got 500 things going on. Working out is not their favorite thing. They're going to tick that box for the day, right? If it can be more enjoyable and just loud music or whatever, right? So be it, right? So I think somewhere in between is really what we're trying to hit, and that's really key, I think.
We have a new co-host.
What's up?
New co-host entered the chat.
I'm going to get us all those ratings.
Oh,
we're going to stay number one in Rapa Nui with this.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. You taught her that? Da-da-da-da-da-da?
Yeah, she knows all the moves.
Hey there, everyone. It's your friend Mateo. What do you think of the episode so far, right? Pretty good stuff. Nice to see Mark. Always nice to see him back in the building, virtually speaking, of course. And that Rick Mayo guy, pretty smart guy. I may end up opening an alloy after this, and I think if you keep watching, you'll see why. Okay, so we'll get back to the episode, but we do have a sponsor for today, and they've given me an ad read here that I've got to get through. So bear with me. I know these are annoying, but I'll get through this, and then we'll get back to the fun stuff, right? Okay, so this episode of Gym World is brought to you by Kilo, and it says here, attention all gym owners, if you're looking for a way to generate more leads, close more sales, and increase client retention, check out Kilo. Kilo is a software company that gives gym owners the tools they need to run a successful gym. Okay, so with Kilo, you get a beautifully designed website, an integrated automated marketing platform to nurture new leads and increase sales, and a gym management system so you can add new client memberships, process payments, and organize your class schedule. So that's pretty neat, right? That's three things all in one. That's kind of nifty. Let's see what else here. At Kilo, they know that most gym owners need to pay a premium for a website, buy additional software for lead capture forms and email automation and texting, and then purchase appointment scheduling and membership management software. And so when you add it all together, you could be spending over $1,000 a month in subscriptions and fees. And then you have to juggle these different logins and website plugins and apps and talk to different support reps from different companies just to gather the data and figure out what the best decisions, how to make the best decisions for your gym. Okay, yeah, I guess you're spending a lot of money and spending a lot of time is the gist of this. Okay, so let's skip ahead. So here's how it works. Okay, so yeah, with Kilo, they've created an all-in-one service so you can get your website, your marketing automation, your sales tracking, gym management needs all in one place and under one roof. Okay, that's nice. It's all in one place. And the best part is you can set this up in less than an hour. Okay, so saves time and saves money. The step one, this is a lot here. Okay, so step one, you get a website. Awesome. Step two, once you get prospects looking at your website and they opt in, you have an automated system that can help you text and call them. Great. So you can get them to show up for their sales appointments. And the step three, once you make a sale, it looks like you get a gym management system, right? So you can take credit cards and charge them for memberships. All right, let's skip to the end. So Kilo has used the system to help over 1,000 gym owners grow their businesses. If you're ready to take your website, your marketing, and your gym management software from a huge expense to a cash-producing asset, hell yeah, cash-producing asset. Great, sounds good. Where do I go? Go to usekilo.com and book a call with them today. All right, cool. That sounds pretty sweet. So if you're in the market for that sort of thing, I guess go and check them out. And if not, skip all this and let's get back to the episode. All right, see you later.
So Rick, we've looked at a bunch of different franchise models on the show. We've seen a lot of the large group stuff. So you have your F45, your Orange Theory. On the other end, seems like there's some big box ones. You know, you have your Planet Fitness of the world and kind of low cost providers. And then we've also looked at a couple that do personal training. But are you guys the only franchise for someone who wants to run a small group training model, or are there other people in the market?
Currently, yes. I mean, obviously, like we've been doing it a long time, so it was, and we're going fast. Like we've awarded, 150 locations in a couple of years. I mean, it's going quick. It was like 20 last month. It looks like we're on pace to do that this month. So if we're doing 250 locations a year, that's probably too quick, right? We'll probably slow our roll a little bit because, like, I got to support guys like Mark, make sure their operation is successful, scale our team, all the things that come along on the backside of really brisk sales. But I think we're first to market with it as of now. And there's always going to be a Pepsi to our Coke, if you will. I'm from Atlanta, so of course we're fans of Coke here. But, Coca-Cola is a big brand, but there's going to be RC Cola and all the million others that come along behind us, as there should be. But by that point, I think we'll have, enough market penetration where it won't matter so much. But right now we're the only one. And what's interesting is, when I'm talking to a franchise candidate that's not someone like Mark, right? They're just an investor. And maybe they're working with a franchise consultant who's like, tell me about what you want the day in the life to look like. And they're like, I want purpose in my life. I'm tired of working at corporate, and they do really well, but they're like, I want to do something else. And they present Alloy. It's really interesting how immediately, like, that simplicity is not just to the consumer, it's also to the investor, where they see it and they're like, this makes sense. And they might be looking at other fitness concepts, and we always win because they look at the others and they're like, well, there's definitely a gap. Like, this is different, right? So as much as you would think, well, it's not, it really is. And it's even recognized by by the investor groups. So I'm not the crazy founder that's like, no one's will ever do what we do. Or, I'm not that guy who's like, thinks his stuff is greater than it is. But at least for now, we're the only ones in this gap in a franchise structure that's offering personal training in a small group setting.
Well, I was just surprised because, like, the model's been around for a long time. You said you've been doing it for over 20 years now. Why has no one done this? Like, it seems to work. We have a lot of case studies on the show of people running similar models and doing it well. Is it like dependent on the operator? Is that the big hang up here, or is it just? You
mean why has no one franchised it?
Yep. Or why has no one built a
obscenely
200 location chain?
It's like, it's. I mean, look, franchising is not for wimps, right? You're probably going to be $5 to $7 million before you even sniff break even, and there's just a lot that goes into it. So, like, we had a long runway to get there. Part of which was sitting on these boards and getting a peek under the covers at what franchising looks like. So, approaching franchising is not for wimps. I mean, here's some stats for you. So, only 15% of all franchises ever get more than 50 locations open. So actually open. Only 2% ever get more than 100 locations open. And unless, like, in a model like ours, we'll be royalty sufficient, which means like the actual clubs are supporting, our expense model as a franchisor at like 70 some franchisees. So you're really up against the odds. Like, you really got to have your shit together if you think you're going to get, down the road and have a successful franchise. And a lot of folks launch it, they run out of money, or they just stall, or the operations aren't as tight as they thought. So it's just a bear. And I'm not trying to overstate that it's so difficult and try to scare people off of it, but it's not easy. That's why only 2% get 100 open, right? So I would say that's probably why people haven't gone to franchising yet. And I know like our model makes a good corporate model as well. Like that was another option for us early on. It's like, our model as a franchisor is a percentage of top line revenue, and our top line revenue in our studios is relatively low compared to some other brands, but the profit margin can be really high. That makes a better owner model. If you think about it, great for Mark. For me, I'm going to have a lot of units in market, right? So you would ask then, why wouldn't you just do more corporate stores? And I think there's no right or wrong answer to that. Like we certainly could have. It takes more capital, so you can go faster using other people's capital. That's what franchising is all about. It would have been more profitable, right, to stay all corporately owned. But also just, why are you doing what you're doing, right, I think is another question. So we certainly could have gone corporately. I don't know why other people haven't. I can't answer that other than it's just real expensive to do so. And I think people run out of operational, sort of bandwidth, if you will, their runway, maybe at 3-7. I mean, you guys know people in your group, they have 1, they go 2, they go 3, and it's like the first one drops and they run to the third one. And it's like this weird shell game of like attention and revenue. So it's harder than it looks, but I don't think there's a wrong answer. And we went franchising. There's more enterprise value for us if we can get to those numbers, right? But then also just altruistically, like, just like you guys, I love entrepreneurship. I teach it at a local college. It's like my favorite thing ever. And I love fitness. It's my whole life's work, really. I've never done anything else. So I got to put these things in one vehicle and take them to market and help people that maybe aren't entrepreneurs, or give Mark a simple model that he can scale outside of the city. And, it's freaking awesome, man. Like altruistically, that's why I like franchising. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, John. And I don't know why people haven't done it. It's just hard, I guess, is the reason.
So you talked about the unit economics there a little bit being lower. Can you run us through what like a decent unit would look like when you're modeling your stuff out?
Yeah. So a good unit for us will do $500K annually. And I can't make claims because franchising is weird that way, but it can have a high margin of profit from that, right? So once Mark gets up and running, he can tell you all his numbers on any podcast you want to talk to him about. But, and we have had instances where clubs can pre-sell full. So, I mean, again, full for us would be a good club would be 130. So we've had clubs open at mid 130s, 140. If you take that number and you're like, all right, they're charging $350 a month, you can kind of figure out what the revenue might look like, right? And then if it's at a high profit margin, return on investment is pretty good. I mean, right now it's about 320 grand is our average across the U.S. to get open. That's all in franchise fees, operating capital, the whole deal is what we're averaging. So if you took that number as an example and then you punched in the numbers I just gave you, right, 500K in AUVs, maybe a bit higher, back your way into a pretty high profit margin, it can be a really good return on investment.
And having talked to a couple franchisors before, so much of the game seems to be like site selection, right? Just like picking the right places to put these things. What is the perfect location for an alloy?
Well, I think it all starts with just, you really have to know your archetype that you're working with. Like an example, have you guys ever seen like the archetype wheel where we've got the characters named on there? So our main character is like mover shaker, right? Which is like someone who's, again, imagine, you guys in 20 years, right? Like you're an entrepreneur, you're very successful, you make your own schedule, that type of idea. And that's really our main archetype. So it's like, okay, if you take that person and you've got an age bracket now and you've got a threshold of household income or median household income, you start there, and then there needs to be a certain density of those individuals. Then you start drilling down into like, does this model fit the business, right? Is the rent factor, because we have a certain rent factor that we're trying to maintain. Is it going to be too expensive to build it out? Is it going to break what's called the item 7, which is the expense model, right? Is that going to be too expensive? Is it a white shell? Is it a dark shell? Is there a bunch of demo that has to happen? So there's a lot that goes into it, but to first just find the spot. Is it target rich environment for our customer archetype? And if it is, great. Then you start looking at ingress, egress. Are there other products and services in this area, brick and mortar, that our customer will participate in? Because that's going to draw more people to the area. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's like 7 layers that we look at to do that. And I'll tell you, man, real estate's tight right now. It took us a long time to get marks, like longer than it should have. But And I just read a really good article in Wall Street where because people aren't commuting to cities as often, they're staying in the burbs, right? So our avatar, if you will. And so because of that, all these high-end services and restaurants and stuff are like, well, people aren't going like let's go to the city and get a good dinner. They're like, well, I can go right down the street and get an amazing steak. So it's like all these high-end services and restaurants are moving out to the burbs to satisfy the needs of this high-end clientele that's maybe not commuting into the city to get these high-end services anymore. So again, the occupancy rate is pretty high in the areas that we're looking. We're still finding it, but yeah, it's a challenging time to find that real estate because it's a popular customer avatar, right? Everybody wants the person with means. They're easier to sell to and to service. So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I was just about to ask that because I've heard you talk about your avatar in other podcasts, and I think it also plays a part in retention too, right? The older demographic, they're more settled. Maybe they have a family, maybe they bought their house, so they're not moving around for a new job or a new city the way 20-year-olds are, let's say. So yeah, this avatar one has means, but also they're more local, so they'll probably stay longer. You can help with your retention. How do you get these people? Because everyone, I think most gym owners, I think that I know, want these people. How do you track them? And I also like with your marketing too. How are you? What are the offers and how are you speaking to them?
Yeah, the offers are simple. Like at first it's scarcity, right? Because we really only have like 150 spots. So we always use that 130 number. So you can actually, with integrity, use scarcity because you really only have that many spots, right? So it's like, hey, get in now while you can. Our hooks are really simple. We might reskin the same hook, but it's usually half off your first month. Honestly, most clubs, when they reach a certain saturation, they pull out. They don't have anything. It's like you just don't need it because you have scarcity. Like if you can really learn how to use that, right, you don't need much else, to be honest, especially with a customer avatar that really likes the scarcity, right? Like they want something that other people can't have. They can afford to pay for it. Like I could think of like one of our customers that ordered a new model of Mercedes when it came out one year. And when it came, it was in such high demand. When it came to the dealership called. And this is just a side conversation. It wasn't even happening with us. It was like clients talking to each other. And the guy's like, yeah, my car came in and the dealership called me and told me there was someone in there and they saw it. And they told the salesperson to call me. They were offering $50K extra, like paid directly to him to get the car now instead of waiting a few months. And they were like, hell no, I've been waiting for this thing for 6 months, and you're like they won't even take $50K extra to delay their, purchase of this new vehicle for 3 or 4 months. So it's that type of clientele. So when you create that scarcity, right, sometimes if you're not careful, any kind of transactional hooks can actually diminish the value of the product, right? Because they don't even want it if it's like some transactional, like buy one, get one free, or like people talk about referral drive, refer a client, get your name in the hat to win something. They're like, I already own 5 of those. I can remember a long time ago as an example just of our customer avatar when flat screen TVs first came out, which you guys don't remember, but they were like super dope. And I mean, it was like we bought one and we hung it on the wall and we had this videos looping on it. It could have weighed like 500 pounds. It was like, it would be the ridiculous TV these days. But back then it was so cool. And I remember we did a referral drive to win this flat screen TV. And these 2 guys were like back and forth and they were right. And they were referring like tons of people. But, I thought it was about the TV, but it turns out it was just about the game and who could win. Because after it was over, the guy that won, it's like, great, do you want the TV? He's like, dude, I have that TV over my bathtub, like in my bathroom. And at the time, it was like the coolest flat screen TV you could purchase, super expensive. He didn't even want it, right? He was just like, I don't want that thing. I've already got one in my bath. It was like his side TV in his bathroom, right? So that's the type of customer avatar that we're working with. So as long as we choose the real estate right, we put it there. Our marketing hooks are just, usual, if you will. But if you can use scarcity, you don't need as many tricks and different things.
And are these things you give to your franchisees? Because I know there are other franchises that I've talked to these gym owners, like I have to go get marketing help from someone else. I'm just not getting it from corporate.
Yeah, we do it a couple different ways. So we do it through preferred vendors. So if it's like marketing materials or playbooks on how to build strategic alliances with other businesses, all that stuff's in there already. Like when you have your pre-sale, you can click on your pre-sale and it's going to give you like all your written materials. You get your starter kit. All that stuff's already done. That's like your tent and your table and your flyers and all that stuff. And then we have a dedicated vendor that you work with who offers a really steep discount just during pre-sale. After that, we've got savvy folks like Mark who might be like, hey, I can do my own Facebook advertising or whatever. And the volume is relatively low, right? You're not looking for 40 new clients a month. So it's like, all right, if Mark wants to run his own marketing post pre-sale, go for it, right? And so we use vendors to do that. Like, I don't want the responsibility of running the marketing in-house, because if we ran into like a troublesome market, it would be like, you're screwing my business. It's like, all right, we're not, right? So thankfully, digital's been pretty strong for us. We're having a harder time just getting people to get out of their gym and go do like the grassroots marketing. Because that's like, I mean, if you're just sitting in your office playing catch, you're not really compelled to go out and like visit some businesses, right? It's like, man, why would I do that? I'm going to sell this thing full. And it's happened. We've had people sell their gyms full just on the digital play, which is great. But I think the expectation should be, and you think about the skills you're building post opening, get out in your community, build alliances with places that have light customers, physical therapists, other places like that, because that's going to feed you long term, and you can really power down your marketing spend as you're open. But we're getting there. It's easier said than done when people are just like just signing people up left and right digitally. So good problem to have.
I mean, yeah, the good news, bad news is it does seem some markets. Now we just launched. I can't speak to Franklin Lakes, but they're my take on this, which I think I've talked about the show before. And John and Mateo, I'm wondering if you have a hot take. It just seems like there are some markets that are just kind of scorched earth at this point. They're sophisticated. They're not trusting. They've had so many ads. You just don't nearly get, like, your cost per lead has actually gone down, but the throughput has become truly, truly terrible. Now, you might be lucky. There are some markets where you can be an idiot and be very successful. If your copy is fine and you picked an O and you just collect the money. And if that happens for you, dear listener, I am thrilled for you. But I think one potential takeaway for listeners, which you can't emphasize enough, is you just can't rely on just digital. You're going to get some of that. And maybe if you might get lucky, you're in a market where maybe that's going to be plenty. But even so, I think you're still exposed, because I think all of these markets are going to get tougher over time. The old school grassroots, kiss the baby, shake the hands, press the flesh. And it's hard because it's maybe cheaper financially, but there's a meaningful cost of time and energy. And that's why also even selecting your team is important here. Certainly as an owner, you can help facilitate some of this. But if you have someone just afraid of people, and they're afraid to go into the coffee shop and, chat it up and see if they can leave some postcards and get some names, you're going to run into some issues. And I think to Rick's point, one of the things that I think is great about this model is when you don't have the hump and you're not trying to outsell, 10% attrition on 800 members, which, by the way, also, that's an amazing business, right? Those businesses can do great top line, great EBITDA, but you just need to then have a team of assassins, right? You just need to hire a very different kind of person, because you need a couple full-time people on a low base that are paid on commission. And you're like, the day starts like, you better get out there. You better get me 10 leads. I don't care what you need to do. I need you to go to your grandma's house. If you're going to that hair salon, you get those email addresses or you're fired. Anyway, I haven't been on there, but I assume that's literally what they say in that exact way. And, for people listening to your trainer, if you don't want to do that game, this is yet one more thing to recommend the small group models. You don't have to be, again, you're still going to market and sell. I don't want to undersell this, because I think that's an issue you see in a lot of independent gyms when they open up, is a very consistent issue. And I assume this issue in CrossFit too. You have the really beautiful, big-hearted, well-intentioned owner. They're not particularly interested in marketing sales. It's CrossFit back in the day where if John mentions marketing, I'm going to blackball you because you're a bad person, right? So the owner's not sold on marketing sales. They hire a bunch of staff. They're not sold on marketing sales. They realize at some point, like, oh my gosh, I guess we have to market and sell, or I am bankrupt and I'm going to actually lose my house. But now at this point, they try to get their team to buy into this a little bit. And all the trainers are like, no, I don't market and sell. I just train. It's evil to talk about marketing and sell. And then you're in this ugly situation where, frankly, you almost have to wait to turn the people over. Like, you sell as best you can. And I'm not trying to be, really nihilistic here. I believe, I got a business partner who's getting a doctorate in change management. You can put a line in the sand and say, hey, everybody, I know this is what we said. It's a new world. We're all marketing and selling now. But in practice, a lot of those people that you hired that didn't like it in the first place, you're going to have to kind of churn through them, right? So one, I think that's an advantage, frankly, also of starting anew, is because from day one, you can set that expectation, because part of the issue, to their defense, is you as the owner didn't make that clear up front. And then number two, frankly, again, at this kind of model, you still just don't have to do quite as much. You're not trying to outsell, 80 lost members per month to just stay where you are.
And with Alloy, if you need to change the culture, you just got to fire 2.5 people. So easy.
So easy. Yeah, exactly.
So Mark, you just went through the process. You just found a location. Yeah, what were some of the elements you were looking for? And from what I understand, took you a tough time because you're in New Jersey, a market near and dear to my heart. It's very, it's brutal out there, especially
Indeed.
Jersey real estate. And I'm imagining post-COVID, it's even worse because so many people left the city. So how did you think about where you wanted to open up shop?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really anything more than what Rick said. I mean, there were some actual logistics that were determined by Greg needing to have proximity to where we opened. So that was a piece of it. Certainly, in theory, one can open up a model far away. My understanding is one of the franchisees in the system opened one 3 hours away very successfully.
I heard that. I heard that one. Yeah.
It can happen, but that's not something we were necessarily banking on for the first one. So at least at the first one, we wanted Greg to get there. So that, to some extent, prescribed something of a radius. And then from there, it was all the things Rick said, So, we've got some fancy software where we're going to figure out, okay, draw the circle. Do we have a sufficient number of people in our demographic with income we need that are within the physical proximity they're going to be able to get here, that there's enough meat on the bone? You'll look at things like, can you find a good anchor tenant? Right, because if you could find a Whole Foods or maybe even other Trader Joe's or fill in the brand for your market, that becomes very, very valuable, right? And I'll say, as a New Yorker, wowee zowie, I'm really thrilled about this because one of my talking points of late, I've been like banging my fist on the table. No, not at all. But I'm like, everyone, no one's paying enough attention to this. Different markets are just different, which is the stupidest thing I've ever said. But I think in the guru space, this is massively underappreciated, that the way you market a business in a tier 1 city is going to be very different than the way you do in a tier 2 versus suburban market versus a rural market. Now, can I send my people in Hell's Kitchen on 9th Avenue onto the street with flyers? I can, but we're going to have a massive number of transient people. Even if we go to the restaurant, the brunch place, like a lot of those people are going to be tourists. They're not local. They're not even necessarily from that neighborhood. Now, that's not to suggest if you're in let's say a suburb of Kansas City, that you might not have people commuting from another hood to get there. But by and large, if you are in a shopping center with a grocery store, a lot of those people, it stands to reason, live in the area. And if it's a higher end grocery store, whoa, Nelly. Now we'll see what happens, and maybe our landlord will yell at us for this at some point. But we are not shy at all about the ground game thing, where it's like I expect my amazing team to make a lot of friends in that parking lot, in a way that is kind and not too aggressive. But I'm just excited about that because again, even in Mark Fisher Fitness, we just don't have that. We'll never have that in New York City. We might have some other advantages, but I for one am excited about that. And so those are some of the things that we consider as we were looking at possible locations.
Mark's partner, Greg, actually operated a gym 3 blocks away from us in Hoboken, New Jersey. And he's one of excellent selection by Mark on both the concept and the partner, because Greg has the gift of gab, and I knew you guys were thinking about this, because anytime Greg faces a problem, I'll get a text, be like, hey, what's the best strategy for like pounding the pavement? What's like the best article you've read about pounding the pavement? And then he'll just like read that. And I don't know if he actually does it or not, but he wants to get everybody in the network involved,
He's in. And, Greg's superpower too, which is hard to replicate, is he has this a crazy zigzag. I tell him I'm here because he comes a little, he might at first blush think, oh, this is kind of like a Jersey guy, right? Like his face he's got a little bit of accent. He's a little face doesn't move a lot.
Is that what you said?
But
his
he's
face,
so sweet. Yeah, like he's just
Jersey
like
things?
Well, because like no, his face is like stoked. Because my face, I'm like, it's like my daughter is like, are you even a human? You're this strange animated Muppet thing. It's like your face.
Yeah, it's Greg with the fucking Jersey face.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about it is, he actually has such a zig to that zag because he's so sweet. So in a previous life, Greg was a club promoter, so he knows everyone, and to know Greg is to like Greg. Like he's just very good at making friends, and it's so silly, but like that's a lot of the game. Now we're very aware. This is something Greg and I talk about a lot. We can't scale Greg indefinitely, right? Because if we want to have 5, 10, 20, what we need to do is not just rely on Greg's skill there. We need to figure out, okay, what are the SOPs and how do we get good at training the hell out of people that are hungry? The first piece there is you got to find the right person, but then you have to just pour everything into them so they learn how to do it. And, early innings, but so far, yeah, we're thrilled with Anthony and Kendra, and we're really excited to find such hungry people that are down to learn and grow with us.
I should have been a club promoter.
You really should.
It's not too late.
It's just making friends. I have a question for Rick.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if it's a question or more of a comment. I want to go back to the pricing thing because, okay, so I've heard you talk about Dunbar's number. So 130, 150, that's what you need to max out a space. Everyone's paying what, $300 a month, $350 a month. We did similar top line revenue numbers. Sounds a lot harder. It was a lot harder than what this sounds like. So, I guess and the part that I can't really get over it's just kind of funny to me that we were talking earlier that CrossFit gym owners and gyms like that are just charging way too little. And I've seen this phenomenon where for a drop-in or an out-of-towner, they'll actually charge them like $20, $25 a session. And if you do that math, you guys at Alloy, it's 3 times a week, $300 a month, that's $25 a session. Why are you charging your guests what you should just be charging your members? I don't know. If they just flip the script a little bit, all these CrossFit gyms just could be doing the same numbers as an Alloy. So I don't know, just something I was thinking about. I guess it's more of a comment, not a question.
But it goes back to brand promise again, pricing anchors, you're doing classes. It's got CrossFit on the door. All that factors into what you can actually charge. If it's next to a Whole Foods and it says personal training on the door, even though the average CrossFit class per John's data says 6.6, I can train 6 people in there. And I can tell you in Greg's market, we're going to be at tier 5. So it's going to be more like $500-600 a month all day long, because in those same markets, it's $150 an hour to get a trainer at an Equinox, right?
I was going to say,
to charge 70, that's half as much. And you go 70 times 12 and it's all right, so, 300 is on the low end. We're seeing those creep a lot higher now. And a lot of that's just organic. Franchisees are it's so awesome when they'll come in, because that's really the hard, if I was opening a studio, I'd charge $1,000 a month. I'd sell 100 memberships, $100K a month. I could probably sell them out in 2 weeks and it'd be great. But I can't scale that, right? That's my belief system. That's going to come out in every interaction. It's going to ooze out of every pore in my body and people are going to think it's worth it, right? But to scale it again, it's okay, we have to be more moderate. But I love the fact that our franchisees are now coming to the table saying, this is a smoking value. We can charge way more than that. So we're slowly seeing, and we have tiered pricing, but we're sliding the tiers a little bit. And we're seeing franchisees organically choose higher pricing tiers. And we're seeing zero negative ramifications to that, except, again, nothing but positive, more revenue right to the bottom line for everyone, right? So I think that's why, though, right? You've got a business that's going to be in a warehouse. There's a dude with his shirt off. There's a pit bull in the corner. Whatever. And I know they're not all like that. I know that's that one scenario. And we worked with CrossFit Invictus, and we worked with a lot of badass CrossFits. We really did. But I think it says CrossFit. It's a class. You're doing Olympic lifting, right? It's different. That has a pricing anchor already. Personal training is a whole different ballgame. So if you're going after the avatar that would buy one-on-one training and you're providing a fair value and still a great service, and come to find out they can have more fun if there's a couple friends in there, it's a totally different business model. So I think it's really that simple at the end of the day.
Looking at your studios, it looks luxurious, right? And that's the other thing too. If you want to charge more like Rick, you have to kind of step up your game in terms of the interior a little bit. All your studios look, immaculate. And I guess something I wanted to circle back on for my previous question is, how do you keep the thing clean? How do you keep it clean if there's only 2 people that work there? Because it looks clean. It looks like it's always clean. And it looks like it has to be clean if you're going to be charging $500 a month for someone to do personal training.
Well, it's a small space. We don't have showers, right? We don't do showers because we're a destination. People are only driving a couple miles and it's in and out, right? Quick. So they're not showering there. We don't have the avatar that's necessarily coming in at 6 a.m. because then they have to rush to work. So they have to be there at a certain time. Think about that person who's coming in, who's master of their own destiny and they control their own schedule. We're as busy at 10 and 11 a.m. as we are at 6 a.m., right? Because we don't have those before and after work rushes per se. So it's a bit of a different avatar. So if you don't have showers and you have a small facility, we handle it with like post-shift cleanup duties, if that makes sense. So it's like, all right, as soon as the shift is over, these are the 3 things you have to do. And it's just spot clean. And then you do a deep clean like once a week and that's it, So it's really not that difficult to keep it clean. And again, design-wise, clean, simple, bright, not Russian vodka bar, right? Because that's going to go out of style with LEDs and all that stuff. It's like our avatar doesn't even want that. Like, let's keep it clean. Let's keep it simple. A splash of color, bright white, bright lights. That's what our customer likes. And so it's easy when you know that you build it that way, right? It's just simple.
This is another missed opportunity, I think, for a lot of gym owners in my experience is I actually just filmed a YouTube video on this because, brand design stuff like kind of matters, and a lot of the archetypal gym owner that we all work with, whether they be from the CrossFit corner or from the Perform Better corner, are not necessarily design aficionados. So I often say if you don't get a lot of positive feedback about your clothes and fashion and about the interior design of your apartment, you might not be doing the best job of creating an amazing space. I'm not necessarily suggesting that literally needs to happen, but in practice, a lot of people's eyes just don't work like that. And if you're dealing with a more affluent clientele, that stuff really does start to matter. I do think that contributes to perceived value, And I would say briefly in regards to the price point, another way that I kind of think about this, which I think the people on this call will get and will likely, trigger warning, confront some of our listeners, but it's like $6,000 a year. You don't have to worry about anything else. You're done. That's it. Just $6,000 a year, and we're not making you pay up front. You pay cancel any time, right? It's $500 a month. So for someone with income, $6,000 a year is just not that much money because it's $6,000 a year. You're done. That's 3 times a week. You're done. Come with us. Go for some walks. We're going to do some strength training that's going to make sense. It's well designed. The coaches will keep your joints in good positions. You're not doing too much. We're going to cover all the bases. We'll do some. Get to some plus 90% heart rate at the end, really get into some zone 5 stuff, go for some walks, you're good. So in fact, when you think about it that way, particularly again, compared to someone that previously was maybe spending $200 a month just for their Equinox open access, renting equipment they don't necessarily know how to use, and then dropping $1,200 for a 10-pack of classes that they have to keep renewing on, this is just simple, simple, simple. I come Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:30 a.m. It's simple, simple, simple. This is well worth it as a percentage of my discretionary income. To not have to worry about this thing is very important to me, particularly as I get into my late 40s and 50s and 60s.
Dude, it's $350 for a lifetime.
Well, yeah. I mean, and John, look, it's like the average price of personal training in the U.S. is around $80. That's average. That's the whole U.S. I think our highest price point market for 3 times a week is like $70 a session. So we're better than the average, and that's taking into account all markets, right? The average car payment in the U.S. right now is $815 a month. It's like, look, $500 a month for someone with means to be healthy and to have a place where they can go and have an outlet doing something they know they need to do with a group of their peers. That's not a lot of money for these folks at all. It's really not. It's like Mark said, can I just pay in advance? Like, I don't even want to do monthly stuff. Just let me give you $6,000. It's like, sure. I mean, honestly, it's like it's a drop in the hat. It really is. And so, not to be flippant about it, but like, hey, that's the avatar we're going after, and that's the plus side of this avatar. Like, it's just not a lot of money. The only roadblocks and head trash we have to work around is again, coaches, directors, don't sell out of your own pocket just because you can't drop $6,000. Yeah, exactly. Like, look, man, this person, like, think of your parents, right? You're probably still living in their basement. They are uber wealthy. Like, would they have a problem with this? I'll tell you, like, we have our youngest franchisee in our system's 23 years old. I thought it was really odd that she was investing in an alloy because she's a beautiful girl. She's like an influencer. And I'm like, I'm just not getting it. So I had to ask her. I pulled her aside at our discovery day and I'm like, hey, so what is the deal? Like, I don't understand this at all. Like, why are you doing an alloy? You don't fit our avatar. She's like, look, I'm the customer I don't want. My friends and I, we hop around from one new concept to another. We're always trying out the latest, like, grand opening special or whatever. It's like my mom, on the other hand, which is basically my age, she's like, my mom, hired a personal trainer 5 years ago. She goes 3 days a week and she said she'll never quit. That's the business model I want. And I was like, that's a great answer. That's a really smart answer from a 23-year-old. So, but she's right. Like, it's nothing for her mom. Her mom's, owns a horse farm and does all. It's just like, that's not a lot of money for these folks. It really isn't. So once we can get the investors are fine with it. Once we can get, again, that passed all the way through, it's like, it's such an easy sell. It really is.
But to Mark's point, you need that, like, this was a brand and aesthetic. Creating that honeypot for this type of customer is something that we took for granted. And if I was to do it over again, now having, we've probably built close to 1,600 websites at this point. We can see like what the difference between a shitty and a good online presence does to a business. But then within the gym itself, like, Mark, you own some real estates. Those guys look at every single thing in terms of ROI, right? Like, especially for a short-term rental, right? They're like, I follow these guys on Twitter. It's like, you put a stock tank in the back of your short-term rental. It's going to increase your nightly rent by $35, which is going to increase the purchase price by like $200,000. So you spend $6,000 on the fucking stock tank so people can take their Instagram photos, and the property is worth $100,000 more. Like, it's common sense. And I don't think a lot of gym owners think that way when they're building out the space, choosing the flooring, like the smell, the location, and some of these little things that seem expensive when you're starting the gym can make the gym worth hundreds of thousands of dollars more in the future, because it allows you to charge $20, $30, $40, $50 more because it feels like a premium space.
Yeah. I mean, ours is so simple. There's nothing in there really. I mean, it's like functional equipment. You guys know what that means, right? And so, like, what do you need? Like, well, you need a backlit sign because that looks kind of cool, or you need a logo on the floor. I mean, there's just a couple little pops and make a difference, and then organize it in a way that, like, when you walk in, because, when you're doing functional training, there's a lot of toys, if you will, around. And if those aren't organized really well, it looks like a freaking train wreck. It looks like a kid's playroom, right? So organize your toys. Like, it's that simple. So, but hire somebody. It's not like we did this on our own. I mean, yeah, we had plenty of empirical evidence from doing it, but you go out and you pay an obscene amount of money from some architect that knows their stuff to come in and design the space based on your archetype, right? And then they say, ta-da, this is what your people like for colors, lights, floor layout, simplicity, whatever those things are. And like, hire experts, pay them, they're well worth it. And you get what you pay for, and they'll design something. And it, like, when I first came out, I'm like, well, that's really silly. It's like so simple. Like, I could have done that, but that's the beauty in it. I couldn't have, right? And then lo and behold, it's well received by the consumer. I'm like, okay, never mind. You do know what you're doing.
Or you could just get an Ally franchise.
And that's the point I was trying to make.
Just do an Ally.
It's so much easier.
Just like, tell me what to do. I'll do it. Okay, I did it. It worked.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so you could just buy an alloy, but what we haven't discussed yet is, who are you looking for, Rick? Like, obviously, if you could have 1 million guys like Mark, that'd be a pretty good system, or maybe it'd be worse, because it's just so Mark knows enough to be dangerous.
Because we'd be so successful, we'd all be making so much money, it'd be boring.
Yeah, we don't want too many Marks. We want to have to work for it a little bit, right?
So who is the ideal person you're looking for to open one of these things?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it starts out with financial qualifying. Like, we have some fitness guys. We're really picky about that because most fitness franchises don't allow fitness people, like we mentioned before. But like, if I trust them and I know they're good operators and understand the situation, like, we'll do it, right? But we're really not looking for people that currently own gyms. That's not our market. And to be honest, like, when you look at the sum of all the studio owners, they normally don't financially qualify. And if they're doing well enough to financially qualify, they have to be very savvy, like Mark, where they're like mature enough to be like, okay, I get it. I'm a crazy entrepreneur, but if I want to do 10 or 20 of something, I have to like temper that and go with something that I can scale. That's a mature play. That's after you've scratched a lot of your entrepreneurial itches, right, to get to that point. So fitness folks, not as much, but really it's just people that can lead people, right? So they're investors. They're coming to us. They're already financially savvy. Typically can run a performer like a champ, right? But can they hire and lead the right people? That is the crux move. We're not going to let you put it in the wrong place. We told you about all the archetypes. We get final approval. So we're going to make sure it's in a great spot. Check. The next, it's the people, 100%. And we often use this term that I learned on a podcast, which is, are you the person that you're looking for is looking for? So when I'm looking at our investors, I'm thinking, can they sit down with someone who's going to be the face of their fitness business? And you can imagine and we know what that person looks like. They look the part. They're outgoing. They're fun to be around, right? Are they going to sit down with that person and be able to convince them, like, hey, like, join me. We're going to go and conquer this local community and change some lives and make some money. Are you with me, right? And they have to be that person. So I have to look at them and think, okay, you're financially qualified. You seem like a solid person, but can you attract a fitness operator to join you on this journey? And they don't have to be fit. They don't have to know anything about fitness. They just have to be a good leader, right? I want to know a lot about their leadership background and what they've done. And, that's the kind of questions that we're asking in that process. So financially qualified first, I think it's tactical, that's a given. And next, can they attract and lead people that, are going to be the faces of these gyms? That's it, John, at the end of the day.
So, Rick, we're running close to time here. Where should people go if they want to learn more about you and Alloy?
If you would like more information, reach out to alloyfranchise.com, and I will be happy to help you. But no, listen, alloyfranchise.com, anywhere on social media, find me. Look, once Mark's up and running, ask him how he likes it. I think he's going to do really well, so I think he'll be a great validator for us as well. But yeah, man, if you have any questions about that, or we've done a million things, just reach out on any platform through the website or social media. And even if you're not franchised, if I can help you and I have time, I certainly will point you guys in the right direction. So it's been an honor, guys. Thanks for having me on. This is probably the best Friday afternoon
and
podcast
strangest.
I've done. Perfect. Perfect.
Whoa!
Not really.
And this has been Gym World Worldwide. Be sure to dislike, unsubscribe, leave a hateful comment, and keep those V's deep, my friends.
And organize your toys. Keep them organized.
Ooh, like that.